Chapter 1021. Ma Shan was also quite taken aback. Tang Wulin's body wasn't very large compared to his, so he should have been able to evade that attack. Even if he were trying to fight fire with fire, this wasn't the way to do it. What was going on? Tang Wulin crashed down onto the ground, and he was feeling quite speechless as stars danced before his eyes. This was the downside of not being familiar enough with his body. However, he also discovered that his physical resistance had increased. Even after taking such a heavy fall, his body hadn't been struck by much discomfort, and he was able to immediately spring to his feet. Again. Boom, boom, boom. One clash took place after another, and Tang Wulin attempted to control his dragon wings, as well as his new body, but he certainly wasn't as adept in this as he was when controlling his former body. Thus, he was sent flying by Ma Shan over and over again, but he managed to get up every single time. After just a short while, his body was already riddled with injuries. However, every time Ma Shan sent him flying or threw him to the ground, he would think that the sparring match was over, but Tang Wulin was always able to get up and dust himself off in a short time. After that, he would charge at Ma Shan again, and his combat prowess wasn't affected in the slightest by the heavy blows he was taking. Following his evolution, his body had indeed become very difficult to control. In particular, the blood essence power being pumped by his heart-like dragon core was far too powerful, and it was often the case that the vast surges of energy from his dragon core would make him lose balance. As such, his attacks were very direct and predictable, and he wasn't able to inject any variation into his movements. In short, he had too much strength for him to control. Ma Shan may have been a pure strength type soul master, but he possessed a vast wealth of battle experience and had countless battle techniques up his sleeve. Furthermore, Tang Wulin discovered that he was also a Tang sect disciple. His controlling crane capturing dragon had been cultivated to an extremely high degree of mastery, and it was especially effective in this battle, given that Tang Wulin was unable to control his body very well. Tang Wulin rushed directly toward Ma Shan again, and the latter merely hunched over and sidestepped while encircling his arms together. A burst of suction force immediately erupted from the side, and Tang Wulin instantly lost balance once again. Ma Shan reached out with his right hand and grabbed onto Tang Wulin's ankle, then slammed him viciously into the ground. Boom. A massive crater was smashed into the platform, and Ma Shan raised a leg before stomping down upon Tang Wulin. However, Tang Wulin managed to roll over in a timely manner before defending himself with both of his arms, then pushing Ma Shan aside. Similar scenarios like this one had already taken place countless times. Ma Shan felt like he was already exerting a lot of effort with each and every one of his attacks, and even if he were fighting a piece of alloy, it should have been shattered into pieces long ago. However, Tang Wulin simply refused to stay down. He was always able to clamber to his feet, and he looked a little wobbly, but he could always continue fighting. Ma Shan was feeling rather speechless. Tang Wulin came off second best in the vast majority of their clashes, and only very occasionally would he actually be able to strike his opponent. Ma Shan discovered that even though Tang Wulin couldn't even control his own body properly, he possessed the greatest strength among the two by far. Even in his martial soul true body state, his strength couldn't compare with Tang Wulin's. What the hell is this kid doing? Ma Shan was feeling quite bemused, and Tang Wulin was constantly adjusting himself. Even though getting hit hurt a lot, his dragon core heart was always able to quickly pump his bloodline power to his injuries and heal them very quickly. Furthermore, his bones and muscles were all extremely resolute, allowing him to brush off these heavy blows with relative ease. If things were to continue like this, Ma Shan was going to run out of soul power before he could defeat Tang Wulin. Even as a soul Douluo, his soul power was limited, and on top of that, he was maintaining his martial soul true body this entire time, so he was definitely expending energy at a faster rate than Tang Wulin. With that in mind, Ma Shan decided that he couldn't allow this to drag on any longer. His 8th soul ring finally lit up for the first time, and after he grabbed onto Tang Wulin's ankle again, he abruptly sprang up into the air with him. His aura abruptly changed, and Tang Wulin was struck by a burst of power that was surging toward him like a volcanic eruption. A layer of bleak white flames abruptly appeared over Ma Shan's body. This was a type of flame with no heat, but Tang Wulin could clearly sense that his opponent's strength had suddenly tripled. Were these the legendary flames of strength? This was a manifestation of ultimate strength. A shocked expression appeared on Tang Wulin's face, and at the same time, his 5th golden soul ring lit up for the very first time. He didn't even know what ability this 5th golden soul ring would bestow upon him, but he reflexively sensed that if he wanted to avert this crisis, then his only choice was to use this 5th golden soul ring's power. This was the bloodline soul skill bestowed upon him by his 10th seal, so it should be far more powerful than that of his previous 4 soul skills. He wondered what kind of effect it would have. Ma Shan could clearly sense a burst of strange power emanating from Tang Wulin's body, and he seemed to have suddenly begun trembling violently. Wait, it wasn't him that was trembling, it was Ma Shan himself. Ma Shan's flames of strength had significantly boosted his strength, and he grabbed onto Tang Wulin's ankles, one in each hand, preparing to tear his body apart to end this battle. However, he discovered that after Tang Wulin's 5th golden soul ring lit up, his arms suddenly began to tremble in an involuntary and uncontrollable manner. Immediately thereafter, Ma Shan's entire body shattered violently, following which a burst of reddish golden light abruptly exploded right before him amid a resounding boom. Even with his powers as a soul Douluo, Ma Shan was still sent flying by the ferocious explosion. Tang Wulin was also quite astonished. He only sensed the blood essence power within his body abruptly becoming a lot more active, producing a type of high-frequency vibrational force that was released outward. The reddish golden light was released to cover an area with a diameter of over 50 meters, and after Ma Shan was sent flying, the reddish golden light caught up to him before exploding on his body over and over again. The explosions forced him all the way to the edge of the competition platform, where he crashed into the protective barrier, then rebounded off it before thumping heavily onto the ground. The 5th bloodline soul ring had had an unprecedented devastating effect, but Tang Wulin wore a wry smile on his face. This was because all of his blood essence power and soul power had been completely exhausted following that attack. What the hell was this thing? It was indeed extremely powerful, but it rendered him completely powerless. Tang Wulin fell from the sky, completely devoid of all soul power and blood essence power. The system adjudged that he no longer possessed the power to continue fighting, and he was teleported out of the competition venue. This was his first defeat in the Star Battle.net, and it had taken place under some very perplexing circumstances. It was undoubtedly the case that this battle had been very beneficial to his quest to control his own body, and the effect of his 5th bloodline soul ring was also extremely powerful. But just what was that thing? Did he have to release all of his power just to unleash it once? No matter how powerful the soul skill was, it was like a kamikaze attack. Tang Wulin was quite bemused, as was Ma Shan, even though he had just won. Does this mean Ma Shan is Blood 9 now? LOL. In the instant that Tang Wulin was teleported out of the venue, he was also evicted, and he turned to Tang Wulin in a flabbergasted manner. What was that soul skill of yours? I felt like I couldn't exert any of my strength on you. It was a very strange feeling. Tang Wulin wore a wry smile as he said, I only just attained this ability, and I still don't even know its effect. Let's end things here for today. For Commander Ma, I have to figure some things out for myself, and we can spar another time. After bidding farewell to Ma Shan, Tang Wulin hurriedly logged out of the Star Battle.net before returning to his room to meditate. That battle had been very beneficial to him for assessing his own condition. It was undoubtedly the case that his drastic overall enhancements had lowered the degree of control he had over his own body, but that wasn't a bad thing. As long as he could learn to control his powers properly, his combat prowess would undoubtedly enjoy a significant increase. But what was that 5th soul bloodline soul skill? What was going on there? Chapter 1022. He recalled back to what he'd felt when he'd released that soul skill, and that sensation played out in his mind over and over again. To his surprise, even his memory functions seemed to have improved, and he was able to clearly recall every single minute detail during his recollection. This was a very clear feeling, and he recalled that at the time, he had purely released his 5th Golden Dragon King soul skill on its own, rather than combining his soul power and blood essence power to unleash a blood soul fusion skill. He had only drawn upon his bloodline power, and it began to produce some kind of strange high-frequency vibration. These vibrations created waves that stacked on top of one another in a relentless manner, and the string of explosions that Ma Shan had been afflicted by had come from none other than those vibration waves. This meant that the attack had been unleashed solely by the vibrational force of his own bloodline, and it possessed extremely potent explosive power, but also required a vast amount of energy to support. What was even stranger was that through his recollection, Tang Wulin discovered that when he was unleashing this attack, he had released it in all directions, so the energy expenditure had been extremely severe. When his bloodline power had been about to run out, his dragon core had violently contracted, drawing all of the soul power from his soul core and converting it into blood essence power so it could continue to maintain this output of explosive vibrational force. Did this mean that after breaking through his 10th seal, his soul power and blood essence power were now interchangeable? If so, then that undoubtedly indicated a closer connection between his two major energy cores. Just unleashing the soul skill on its own had produced such a powerful effect. What if he were to unleash it as a blood-soul fusion skill? The rate of energy expenditure would definitely become faster, but surely the explosive force would also be increased. He had to give that a try later on. He entered a meditative state and constantly assessed the details of his fight against Marshan, benefiting immensely in the process. This was a very direct type of improvement, and it directly connected to his overall combat prowess. However, it would not be so easy for him to completely control his newfound power. That was something that required more time and practical combat experience. Thankfully, the finals of the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition were about to commence. Several days later, Tang Wuling logged onto the Star Battle.net again, and was surprised to find that the scenes he was greeted by had changed. After logging on, the first thing that appeared before him was a shimmering golden door of light. He stepped into the door of light, and in the next instant, he was teleported to a completely different place. Welcome to Star City, an electronic voice announced. Star City? Was this the city of the Star Battle.net? This artificial intelligence system had only just begun being used in a practical setting, so it was still quite unrefined, but it was undoubtedly the case that everything was improving. This Star City looked far better than their Western competition region. At the very least, it looked more like an actual city. The nickname Little Tang was hovering above his head alongside his win/loss record, but unfortunately, he no longer had a 100% win record. Please go to the Star City Soul Battle Arena to announce your arrival and prepare for your upcoming match. The first round of the finals is going to be an elimination match, and you will be assigned a random opponent. The electronic voice rang out once again. Indeed, the first 3 rounds of the finals of the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition were all elimination matches, and only the top 32 could progress to the round robin stage. Tang Wuling had his mission etched firmly in his mind. A berth in the top 3 wasn't good enough anymore. In the Soul Master battle discipline, he had to become the champion. Strangely enough, he had felt that there was no chance for him to even secure a berth in the top 3 in the past, but ever since he defeated Blood 9, becoming the champion no longer seemed like an impossible task for him. In particular, after he broke his 10th Golden Dragon King seal, this feeling of hope and anticipation only became more pronounced. The only thing that was troubling to him was that he was still unable to fully control his own power, but practical battles were undoubtedly the best way to iron out this issue. Finals, here I come. There were a series of arrows of light guiding Tang Wuling toward the Star City Soul Battle Arena, where he announced his arrival. The process was very simple, and he quickly completed it after arriving at the designated area. However, Tang Wuling had also noticed something rather strange, which was that he hadn't seen any other participants here. The Star City Soul Battle Arena up ahead was quite similar to the Western competition region, except it was slightly larger in area, and it was currently completely empty aside from himself. Why was this the case? Unbeknownst to him, this was a measure taken by the system to better ensure the confidentiality of all of the participants. After Tang Wuling arrived in a golden area, the words Little Tang gradually faded from above his head, and it was replaced by only a number, which was 33. Was this his participant number? He wondered if the Federation was going to find out his name in the end. In any case, that wasn't a cause for concern as he was at the Blood God Legion. Your registration is complete, and a random opponent has been drawn for you. Please prepare for your upcoming match, which will commence in 10 minutes. As expected, the system being used in the finals wasn't as straightforward and brusque as the one in the regional matches. Unbeknownst to Tang Wuling, in the future, the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition was going to become an extremely grand competition of massively extravagant proportions. All of the participants who had made it to the finals of this inaugural edition of the competition were going to be remembered in history. He sat down with his legs crossed and entered a tranquil state of mind. During his cultivation in the past few days, Tang Wuling discovered that his spiritual power seemed to have also increased significantly along with the other aspects of his power. Even though he hadn't reached the spirit domain realm, he had definitely progressed very far in the spirit of this realm. Through his spiritual power, he could sense even the most minute changes within his body, and he could also detect everything going on around him in a very large area. Even more importantly, he was now able to use his spiritual power to identify the invisible energy particles in the air, and that was the most useful aspect of possessing such a high level of spiritual power. According to what he had learned in Shrek Academy, the signature trait of spirit domain realm spiritual power was the ability to discern elements. Even though he only had a murky sense of this at the moment, he didn't seem to be far away from reaching that level. The spirit domain realm was already the very pinnacle for a normal human. It was said that after reaching the spirit domain realm, one would attain a spiritual domain, and everyone had different spiritual domains. However, one thing was constant, which was that all spiritual domains were extremely beneficial to one's cultivation and combat prowess. All limit Douluos had to possess spirit domain realm spiritual power as a foundation, and it was said that without reaching the spirit domain realm, one could never become a demigod. Following the conclusion of this round, he was going to make some inquiries to Blood One surrounding this matter, and he also wanted to check how much spiritual power he currently possessed. It was undoubtedly the case that as a limit Douluo, heartless Douluo Cow Badger definitely possessed spirit domain realm spiritual power. With the advancements of present-day technology, limit Douluos weren't as revered as they were in the past, but their reputations definitely hadn't waned by much. The Federation didn't dare to completely stomp out the Tang sect, and the main reason behind this was the fact that the Tang sect the 2 limit Douluos, the heartless Douluo and the amorous Douluo, among their ranks. However, in Tang Wuling's opinion, it was most likely the case that even the Federation was unaware of the fact that the heartless Douluo was Blood One of the Blood God Legion. The Blood God Legion seemed to have its own unique system when it came to confidentiality, and all members of the Blood God Legion had to follow the rules here, no matter where they came from. Tang Wuling was very much in approval of this. The Blood God Legion had already given so much for the Federation, and it would be very disheartening to see them being bogged down by external matters. 10 minutes quickly passed by, and a streak of golden light flashed past, following which Tang Wuling found himself on the competition platform. The surrounding area was completely silent, and the entire competition platform was emanating a faint white light. Looking around, Tang Wuling discovered that this competition platform had a diameter of around a kilometer, which was extremely extravagant. Even for mega battles, a kilometer seemed to be overkill. In the distance, around 300 meters away, his opponent had also appeared. Both of their faces were blurred out to one another, so he could only see the number 118 hovering above his opponent's head. Tang Wuling's eyes narrowed slightly as he primed himself and awaited the announcement from the electronic voice. In contrast with the silence on the competition platform, the entire Federation was in a state of excitement outside the competition venue. The Federation spent a huge sum of money to televise the finals of the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition across the entire Federation. Chapter 1023. This was the first time that the Federation was trying out this piece of technology. Generally speaking, Seoul broadcasts differed from region to region, and it was the first time that they were going to attempt to broadcast an event across the entire Federation. This was partially due to the fact that the Federation had just successfully launched its first signal satellite into space a year ago, and also because the Federation was making a great effort to make the Star Battle.net more prevalent. The Star Battle.net had cost an astronomical sum to be researched and developed, and without sufficient financial support, even the Federation wouldn't be able to keep it running for long. Only with sufficient widespread attention would the federal parliament receive more financial support, and that was why this competition was held. As things turned out, it had garnered even more attention than they'd expected. Even though soul technology had already become a part of everyday life, the people of the Douluo continent still revered individual heroic figures. 20,000 years ago, the founder of the Tang sect, Tang San, had ascended to the divine realm. Prior to his ascension, he had defeated the ambitious Spirit Hall to grant freedom to all of the soul masters on the entire continent. 10,000 years ago, the founder of the Spirit Pagoda, Spirit Ice Douluo Huo Yuao, was able to destroy the entire Holy Spirit cult on his own and also defeated Beast God Yitian. He had stopped the dominant Sun Moon Empire by himself, thereby giving the Douluo Empire a chance to recuperate, and only then did it go on to become the current Douluo continent. Now, there were more limit Douluos than ever, but where did the peak of Soul Masters truly lie? In particular, what were the powerful beings of the younger generation capable of? These were all things that were unknown to the general public, and it was undoubtedly the case that the Star Battlenet Inter-Federation competition had given them a lens through which they could peek into the world of Soul Masters. Furthermore, the event was going to be broadcasted for free all over the entire Federation, making it possible for everyone to spectate the event even without having to set foot outside their doors. How could the competition not receive widespread attention? Even the trauma caused by the destruction of Shrek City had been significantly dampened by this competition. There were countless screens across the entire Federation broadcasting the competition, and as this was the first round, there were as many as 128 matches taking place on the same day. Due to the fact that these were live broadcasts, the matches weren't all taking place at the same time. Instead, they were split up into 10 different time slots, and over 10 matches would be held per time slot. There were going to be professional commentators and workers interchanging between the live broadcasts to ensure that as much of the competition was shown as possible, and Tang Wulin's match was one of the matches taking place in the first time slot. Furthermore, it was the first one to appear on the live broadcasts, so there were countless spectators all over the entire Federation currently watching this battle. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin. As the electronic countdown concluded, a massive light projection appeared on everyone's screens, following which the two participants sprang into action in unison. Tang Wulin's initial movement could only be described as earth-shattering. He stomped his left foot into the ground, and his body was propelled forward amid a resounding boom. The ground beneath his feet was cracked and caved in a diameter of 10 meters around him, and he instantly broke through the sound barrier, covering 300 meters in the blink of an eye. My God! What is this level of speed and explosive power? Can the human body really handle something like this? He isn't even wearing his battle armor. The commentator instantly exclaimed. They were supposed to constantly interchange between the 10 matches currently being held, doing their best to show the most spectacular snippets of every single match, but Tang Wulin's stomp was far too astonishing, and it rendered the commentators almost unable to switch to any other matches. Tang Wulin had used his Mountain Dragon King torso bone to make himself lighter, then exerted enormous power into the ground to instantly raise his speed to more than twice the speed of sound. This explosive acceleration took him to his opponent in an instant. He wasn't using any weapons or techniques, he was simply throwing a punch at his opponent. If someone could slow down the image currently being broadcasted, then they noticed that as Tang Wulin unleashed that punch, his skin took on a reddish-golden hue, following which a series of reddish-golden blood vessels began to bulge beneath his skin. Immediately thereafter, layers of fine golden dragon scales appeared all over his arm, and his golden dragon claws hurtled directly toward his opponent's chest. All of the finalists had progressed from their respective regional competitions, so there were no weaklings among them. Tang Wulin's opponent was also quite stunned by his explosive acceleration, but he still reacted very quickly. He sucked in his stomach, and a speck of light appeared on his chest. There wasn't enough time for him to release his full suit of battle armor, but he managed to release his cuirass. He didn't try to use his arms to block the oncoming attack as Tang Wulin was simply far too fast for him to do that. Instead, he swung both of his fists toward Tang Wulin's temples, and as he did so, a sharp spike emerged from each of his hands. His attack was extremely precise and accurate, and if his spikes were going to strike Tang Wulin's temples at around the same time that Tang Wulin's attack struck his chest, he had his cuirass to protect his chest, so he could survive the attack, but being impaled in the temples spelled certain death. He had instantly reacted and made the correct decision to attack an area that his opponent had to protect, and just that reaction alone indicated that he did indeed deserve a berth in the finals. He was also very pleased with his own reaction. At Tang Wulin's current speed, there was no way that he'd be able to change directions as his body wouldn't be able to handle the impact. The drawback of having extreme speed was that the excessive momentum made it difficult for one to control their body. Even if Tang Wulin were to just barely control himself and evade that lethal attack, his attack would still be completely nullified. An agility attack system Soul Master shouldn't have very powerful defenses, and he just so happened to possess a wide-range attack that could take out his opponent in an instant. That's right, he had reflexively drawn to the conclusion that Tang Wulin was an agility attack system Soul Master. By the time the commentator finished his first sentence, the two of them were already extremely close to one another. In the next instant, everyone's screens were completely dominated by a burst of golden color. It was a pair of golden featherless wings that were covered in rhomboid dragon scales. Compared to the scales on his body, those on his wings were slightly larger, but also a little thinner. As the wings were fully spread open, the wingspan reached over 5 meters, and Tang Wulin's insane momentum drew to an abrupt halt. His drastic deceleration began right as his opponent swung those sharp spikes toward him. The triumphant expression that had just appeared on his face instantly stiffened, but unfortunately, Tang Wulin didn't get to catch a glimpse of this. His opponent's sharp spikes had clashed with one another as he'd misjudged Tang Wulin's speed, thereby obscuring Tang Wulin's vision of his face. Immediately thereafter, Tang Wulin's fist arrived, and they struck the pair of sharp spikes first before bulldozing onward, crashing directly into his opponent's cuirass. Boom! The Golden Dragon Claw's crushing special effect was unleashed, and the immense power of the Golden Dragon King erupted forth. Number 118's body flew backward while rotating like a windmill in a completely uncontrollable manner. After that, Tang Wulin flapped his dragon wings vigorously once again, thereby allowing him to instantly catch up to his opponent, and he unleashed another simple punch without any additional tricks or embellishments. Right as the smug look had stiffened on number 118's face, he heard the sound of his cuirass being shattered, and he had been trying to release his suit of battle armor this entire time, but he felt as if he'd just been run over by a high-speed soul train. His body was sent flying in an uncontrollable manner. His soul power had been completely scattered, and he wasn't even able to release his full suit of battle armor. How was this possible? He was then greeted by the sight of a pair of golden eyes, as well as the golden fist that was rapidly expanding in his field of view. Chapter 1024. Boom! Blood mist exploded through the air, and only at this moment did a loud dragon's roar echo throughout the entire competition platform. A massive ferocious-looking golden dragon projection had also appeared behind him, and even though the projection vanished in an instant, it still left all of the onlookers with a very deep impression. This is simply preposterous. The commentator was already completely dumbstruck. This was only the first match of the finals of the Star Battlenet Inter-Federation competition that was being broadcast, yet the results had completely stunned everyone. The commentators all naturally had a very deep understanding of the world of Soul Masters, but no amount of knowledge could prepare them for the incredible scenes they had just witnessed. All of the finalists here had progressed through their respective regional competition, so there were no weaklings here, yet number 118 had just been slain in what felt like the mere blink of an eye. The brutal way in which Tang Wulin had crushed his opponent, the dazzling dragon projection, and the deafening dragon's roar at the end had truly stunned everyone on a visual and auditory level. This number 33's combat prowess was way too insane. All of the spectators sitting in front of their screens were struck by the exact same feeling. Asphyxiation. That's right, it was asphyxiation. They felt as if they could sense the terrifying pressure emanating from the body of the man on the screen, and all of them were struggling to draw breath even though they weren't actually in his presence. A large victory sign was displayed on the screen. The battle had concluded after just 2 attacks, and the entire duration of the match was only less than 2 seconds. It was definitely the fastest match during this first round of the finals, and perhaps the fastest battle in this entire competition thus far. Tang Wulin withdrew his golden wings, and the number 33 hovering above his head was shimmering with golden light. As his wings were withdrawn, he vanished amid a flash of light. He had secured victory in the first round of the elimination stage. He was only a 6-ring Soul Emperor, but his combat prowess far exceeded that level. This was the impression that Tang Wulin gave to his competitors. Even though he had killed his opponent in virtually an instant, the disparity in their powers wasn't actually that significant. His opponent had been killed so quickly mainly due to the fact that he had failed to judge his own situation. The human body had limits when it came to strength and resistance. At the very least, that was the case before one exceeded a certain cultivation rank. However, the speed and strength that Tang Wulin had just displayed were both undoubtedly on a superhuman level, thereby drawing his opponent to a false conclusion. If he had adopted a fully defensive stance from the very beginning as opposed to trying to retaliate with his sharp spikes, he would have lasted a little longer. This battle had been an experiment for Tang Wulin. He was experimenting with his control over his current level of strength and speed. During the past few days, he had constantly been trying to attain greater control over his own strength, and the more he sensed the changes that had taken place within his own body, the more stunned he was by the benefits that the 10th Golden Dragon King seal had brought to him. In the past, his right Golden Dragon Claw's crushing special effect and his left Golden Dragon Claw's tearing special effect only had a certain activation probability. However, he could now activate those special effects at will, and his overall control over his Golden Dragon King power had become a lot more proficient. He had propelled his body forward with absolute speed, and at that insane level of speed, just the impact he'd create by crashing into his opponent would be too much to bear for other Soul Masters. of the same cultivation rank, but his own speed didn't affect him at all. Only after spreading his wings to forcibly arrest his momentum was he struck by a slight sense of discomfort, but it was very minor, and it instantly disappeared as his blood essence power circulated through his body. In a sense, it could be said that Tang Wuling's current body wasn't completely human. His physical resistance was far superior to that of the average person, and even a titled Douluo couldn't compare to him in this area. This was why he'd been able to secure such an easy victory. After departing from the competition venue and logging off from the battle net, Tang Wuling took a moment to reflect on that battle. A faint smile appeared on his face, and he was pleased to discover that he had attained a greater level of control over his own strength. He set a goal for himself, which was to defeat Blood 9 in a battle that was going to take place in less than a month. It was undoubtedly the case that if he wanted to defeat Blood 9 again, then the first thing he would have to do would be to hone his control over his newfound power. Only then would he be able to truly harness it. He was really fond of this violent and aggressive way of battle, and it seemed that his Golden Dragon King bloodline was also relishing this feeling. This was most likely the true nature of the Golden Dragon King. After putting on his clothes and departing from his dormitory room, Tang Wuling went directly to Blood 1's dormitory room. The two rooms were situated very near to one another anyway, and he stopped outside Blood 1's door before sending a message to him, telling him that he wanted to ask some questions. It took Blood 1 around 10 minutes to reply, and Tang Wuling was just about to leave when Blood 1 told him that he was ready to see him. Tang Wuling knocked on the door, and it was quickly opened. "Come in." Tang Wuling walked into the room to find that Blood 1 was seated with his legs crossed, seemingly in the middle of meditation. "Sorry to disrupt your cultivation," Tang Wuling said in an apologetic manner. Blood 1 smiled and opened his eyes as he replied, "There's no need to apologize. I've already reached a bottleneck that's impossible for me to break through anyway. If I try to make that breakthrough, it'll be a trial of life and death, and I'll have less than a 1% chance of survival. If that day ever comes, I'll make sure to invite you to watch me. Perhaps the experience will help you in the future." A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. "I'd rather not see that happen. The Tang sect still needs you." Blood 1 continued, "All right, let's not get into those matters. What did you want to see me for?" Tang Wuling replied, "I've recently felt like my spiritual power seems to have made a breakthrough, but I don't know what level it's on, and I wanted to ask you about some ways in which spiritual power can be used." "You made another breakthrough. What level are you at now?" Blood 1 asked. Tang Wuling replied, "I seem to be able to sense some energy elements now." Blood 1 raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. "You can sense energy elements now? What kind of breakthrough is that?" "That's an ability that you've attained from the moment you began to be able to sense the existence of your spiritual power." Tang Wuling cleared his throat in a rather awkward manner. "It's a little different. What I'm saying is that I can now see different colors of energy particles in the air now." Blood 1 faltered slightly upon hearing this, and immediately thereafter, his eyes widened as his pupils noticeably contracted. His pupils then changed colors, with one of them turning into a purple color while the other adopted a golden hue, and two bursts of substantial purplish golden light surged toward Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly, but he made no effort to evade. A purplish golden color also appeared in his eyes, and it wasn't anywhere near as pronounced as the color in Blood 1's eyes, but it was clearer and purer. The two bursts of purple light only came into slight contact with one another before Tang Wuling immediately sensed a burst of vast spiritual power enveloping his entire body. He wasn't experiencing any discomfort from this, but he felt as if his entire being had been laid bare before Blood 1. All of a sudden, his dragon core suddenly began to pump violently, and a hint of reddish golden color suddenly seeped into his purple pupils. A vicious aura erupted from his body, and the feeling of being laid bare instantly vanished. The blood essence within his body churned, and a low dragon's roar erupted from his entire body as a show of intimidation. It wasn't intentional," Tang Wuling said with an innocent look on his face. Blood 1 had a very peculiar look in his eyes as he appraised Tang Wuling, and he also withdrew his purple demon eyes. "I can see that you're already quite advanced in the spirit of this realm, but how is that possible? Your spiritual power shouldn't have been able to progress so quickly, even if you begun cultivating it as a fetus." The fact that even Blood 1 was astonished was a testament to Tang Wuling's current level of spiritual power. In particular, the fact that his bloodline power could fuse with his spiritual power was even more astonishing. Blood 1's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, "There's no need for you to undergo specific testing on your spiritual power. The fact that you can see energy elements in their true forms indicates that you've reached the minimum threshold of the spirit domain realm." Tang Wuling asked, "Then what should I do from now on?" Blood 1 replied in a calm manner, "Keep experiencing things. Once you can clearly sense all of the energy around you, you can try to control them with your spiritual power. Make sure you completely refrain from using your soul power and blood essence power, and only use your spiritual power to try and control them, as well as to resonate with them. The moment that you complete that step is the moment that you'll be setting foot into the spirit domain realm. This is going to be a long and boring process, but at your level of spiritual power, it'll naturally increase over time, so don't try to rush things and just go with the flow." "I understand," Tang Wuling replied. It was much better to receive guidance from Blood 1 than to stumble around like a headless chicken. From what Blood 1 was telling him, it seemed that all he had to do was cultivate as normal, so that was quite simple. Blood 1's expression changed slightly as he appraised Tang Wuling. "Something seems to have happened to you. Your powers have increased, and your blood essence power has become even denser. Also, it's different somehow. It feels like your blood essence power has come alive." Chapter 1025. As expected of a limit Douluo, Blood 1 was immediately able to identify that something had changed within his body. Tang Wuling chuckled. "I did improve slightly, mostly in terms of bloodline power. I seem to have recently broken through a bottleneck, but after my breakthrough, it's become harder to control my own strength. I'm going back to cultivate now." Blood 1 said, "The finals have commenced, right? Have you had your match yet?" Tang Wuling replied, "I just finished my first match, and I won. The finals are quite interesting. Everyone gets assigned a number, and my number is 33. Blood 1 continued, "Don't forget your mission. I never go back on my word." "Yes," Tang Wuling replied in a resigned manner. Blood 1 looked on as Tang Wuling departed, and he decided to use his jurisdictive power to request a copy of Tang Wuling's competition footage. He couldn't shake the feeling that Tang Wuling had undergone a very significant transformation, one that went far beyond his expectations. After departing from Blood 1's room, Tang Wuling didn't return to his own room. Ever since his sparring match with Marshan, he had constantly been cultivating in his own room before participating in the competition, and he was really getting sick of staying indoors. Thus, he decided to go out for a walk and give Yu a call. During the match that had just taken place, he had received some inspiration about the mecha that he wanted to construct for himself. His situation was different from everyone else's, so his mecha naturally had to be different as well. After getting onto the elevator and leaving the Blood God Battalion, Tang Wuling hesitated momentarily before removing the epaulets from his shoulders. He was so young, so it was far too eye-catching for him to be wearing Major General epaulets. Marshan had been a little reckless and violent the other day, but in reality, anyone else would have also doubted his identity, unless a public announcement was made to the entire legion informing everyone of his new military rank. The only way that he could avoid unnecessary trouble was to remove his epaulets. Sure enough, with his epaulets removed, he was spared a lot of trouble. He still received the occasional glance as not wearing one's epaulets was technically also a breach of the rules of the Blood God Legion, but that was only a minor breach, and it didn't really matter seeing as he was in the resting area. The resting area was always a lively and bustling place. After all, this was the only place where members of the Blood God Legion could go to relax and have fun. Tang Wuling went to the bar area to order himself a drink before taking a seat and going for a sip. The sweet and refreshing drink flowed down his throat, instantly bringing him a sense of happiness. He used his Blood God bracelet to call Yuna's number and waited for her to pick up. After just a short while, Yuna's voice rang out. Her voice was gentle and mellow, and it was filled with elation as she said, "I really miss you, father. When are you coming back?" As soon as he heard her voice, Tang Wuling instantly felt as if all of his exhaustion and psychological tension had disappeared. "I'll go the day after tomorrow. Is that all right?" "Yes. That would be great." Yuna squealed with excitement. "I'll be waiting for you." "All right." Tang Wuling smiled as he told Yuna about some of the interesting things that had happened to him in the Legion, including how he had accidentally defeated Blood 9, as well as his altercation with Marshan over his military rank. He gave her a recount of everything so she could share in the joy that he was experiencing in the Legion. Yuna listened with rapt focus and occasionally extended a few words of concern, making Tang Wuling feel very warm on the inside. And before he knew it, a warm and gentle smile had appeared on his face. All of a sudden, he felt an aura approaching him from behind, and he reflexively turned around before reaching out with a grab. Hee, ow. A burst of chuckling had only just rung out before it instantly cut off and transformed into a howl of anguish. A burly figure was grabbed by Tang Wuling and pressed down onto the table before him. "What happened, father?" Yuna exclaimed on the other side of the line. Tang Wuling hurriedly said, "It's all right. It's just a comrade of mine playing a prank on me." He released Jiang Wuyu as he spoke before giving him a warning glare. "Oh, that's good to hear. You have to come as early as possible. Father, I'll be waiting for you." "All right." Tang Wuling ended the call before turning to Jiang Wuyu, who was rubbing his wrist with a peculiar look on his face. What are you looking at? Tang Wuling snapped. Jiang Wuyu raised an eyebrow in response. How do you have a daughter already at your age? From the sound of her voice, she's not just an infant, either. What age did you first begin doing the deed? Shut up. Tang Wuling snapped. That was my girlfriend. Jiang Wuyu faltered slightly before the peculiar look on his face became even more pronounced. My, Tang Wuling, to think that a bright and handsome young man like you would have such a dark and twisted interior. I didn't think you'd be into this type of stuff. You're the perfect example of a pretty boy with a rotten interior. A cold light flashed through Tang Wuling's eyes. Are you asking for a beating? Jiang Wuyu chuckled. Hurry up and teach me how you did it. How did you manage to get your girlfriend to call you father? Do you have some kind of secret formula? Tang Wuling glowered at him. She's suffering from amnesia, so she only has her memories as a small child. Jiang Wuyu appraised Tang Wuling with a surprised expression and asked, amnesia? How did that happen? A pained look flashed through Tang Wuling's eyes. She lost her memories while saving my life. Jiang Wuyu's expression immediately changed upon hearing this, and he wore a guilty and apologetic look on his face as he said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Tang Wuling shook his head. Perhaps this is a good thing. Truth be told, even I don't know whether I want her to recover or not. I want her to recover her memories so that she can be complete again. But the current situation is quite good as well. At the very least, she can always be by my side. Jiang Wuyu's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. By your side? You didn't bring her with you, did you? Now I get why you're so eager to get promoted. You want to be able to take leave so you can go and visit her, right? There was nothing for him to hide, so Tang Wuling nodded in response. She's staying at the scorching basin, and I've already visited her once. I'm planning to go again the day after tomorrow. A thought suddenly occurred to Jiang Wuyu, and he said, by the way, I heard from Yakshu that you're a major general now. He glanced at Tang Wuling's shoulders as he spoke, but there were no epaulets for him to see. Tang Wuling nodded in response. That's right. I'm looking forward to hearing you call me superior. Jiang Wuyu's throat immediately ran dry. It had only been a few months since he'd come to the Legion. In the beginning, this guy had been referring to him as superior, but now, the roles were already reversed. That's way too fast. What the hell did you do to get promoted so quickly? Tang Wuling replied, didn't Yakshu tell you? I defeated Blood 9, so I'm Blood 9 of the Blood God Battalion now, and all of the Blood Gods are at the Major General rank or above. Why, you defeated Blood 9? Jiang Wuyu stared at him in a flabbergasted manner as he exclaimed, you already have the power to defeat Blood 9, yet you still went out of your way to challenge me. What kind of inhumane bastard are you? Tang Wuling rolled his eyes. Is there something wrong with your reflex arc? Shouldn't you be praising me for my powers? Praise my ass. I only recall you beating the crap out of me. Jiang Wuyu grumbled with an enraged look on his face. Tang Wuling's expression changed slightly. A benevolent smile suddenly appeared on his face. How about this? Wuyu, it was indeed wrong for me to take advantage of you on that day, so I'll give you an opportunity to exact your revenge. Let's go to the Star Battle.net, and as long as you pay for the combat room rental fee, I'll let you beat me to your heart's content. I won't dodge, defend, or retaliate. How about that? You only have to give me 1,000 federal credits per minute, and I'll let you beat me up as much as you like. Jiang Wuyu appraised Tang Wuling with a skeptical expression. Really? Are you really that much of a good guy? Federal credits didn't really matter much to him. There was no use for money in the Blood God Legion, and they received a very high monthly salary, so he had a lot of federal credits that were sitting around for no purpose. Tang Wuling sighed with a disdainful look on his face. I didn't think that you wouldn't even dare to beat me up. How did you become the commander of the melee combat battalion like this? Is this the Iron Will of your Iron Will Corps? I should go and ask Brother Marshan about this. Chapter 1026. Piss off. Are you trying to drive a wedge between us? Who says I wouldn't dare to beat you up? I know you're goading me, but I'll take you up on that offer. However, let's establish the premise first. You won't retaliate, evade, or defend yourself, right? That's right. I've always been a man of my word. If you don't believe me, we can sign a contract and have the Legion be the contract witness, Tang Wuling said with a smile. He was quite excited to see that Jiang Wuyu had taken the bait again. All right, but there's no need for any witnesses. Just write an agreement for me, and if you revoke it, you'll earn yourself the reputation of a deceitful snake. Jiang Wuyu threatened in a menacing manner. Tang Wuling immediately wrote up an agreement as requested. Jiang Wuyu carefully examined it to ensure that there were no issues before signing the agreement. He then produced a stack of federal credits before slamming it down in front of Tang Wuling. I'll go for half an hour first. Let me teach you a good lesson. He had suffered horrendous abuse at the hands of Tang Wuling the other day, and he still hadn't gotten over that horrific experience. Now that Tang Wuling had defeated even Blood 9, he knew that he'd have no other chance to exact his revenge, so he was certainly going to jump on this opportunity. He knew that Tang Wuling had to have some kind of objective for doing this, but he then recalled just how much of a cheapskate Tang Wuling was, and he immediately identified what he thought to be the reason behind this offer. Tang Wuling was doing this for money. Tang Wuling accepted the federal credits before raising his eyebrows at Jiang Wuyu. You better not disappoint me. As opposed to going to the Star Battle.net, the two of them went to the competition platform for practical combat drills in the Legion. There, Tang Wuling was greeted by a flurry of ferocious attacks from Jiang Wuyu. Boom. After Jiang Wuyu sent Tang Wuling flying with a single slap, he finally believed that Tang Wuling seriously wasn't going to retaliate. In fact, he didn't even release his scales, and he was sent flying for several dozens of meters before crashing to the ground. He then immediately rolled over and stood up, brushing off some non-existent lint from his military uniform before raising an eyebrow at Jiang Wuyu again. Did you not have breakfast? Why don't I feel anything? A speechless look appeared on Jiang Wuyu's face. He knew that Tang Wuling had extraordinary physical resistance, but that slap was powerful enough to flatten a metal ball into a pancake. Yet he was claiming that he couldn't even feel it. You made me do this. Hurry up. You've only got 30 minutes, you know. Boom, boom, boom. Slap, slap, slap. Tang Wuling's body was sent flying over and over again before crashing heavily down onto the ground each time, but he was always able to rise to his feet as if nothing had happened. Jiang Wuyu was only beating him with his fists in the beginning. However, he soon donned his suit of battle armor, then summoned his weapons, and even began using his soul skills in order to constantly increase his offensive output. However, Tang Wuling was always able to shrug off his attacks. He was looking a little bruised and battered, but he was completely fine. After Jiang Wuyu sent Tang Wuling flying with his giant hammers again, he didn't continue to attack. Instead, he appraised Tang Wuling with a perplexed look and asked, are you really alright? You haven't suffered any internal injuries, have you? Money is a good thing, but you have to be alive to spend it. Tang Wuling replied in an indifferent voice. Don't worry about me. Watch this. A layer of reddish golden light lit up over his body as he spoke, and all of his bruises and injuries vanished as if they'd never even been inflicted in the first place. Are you really human? Jiang Wuyu was completely speechless. Please refer to me as God. You can beat me to your heart's content. Don't forget that you only have 1 minute left before you have to recharge. I'll pay you the total sum I owe you at the end. Here I come. Jiang Wuyu rushed forward while swinging his giant hammers through the air. Was Tang Wuling not in pain? He was being beaten by a strength-type Soul Emperor's full force attacks, so he'd be lying if he said that it didn't hurt. However, this type of pain brought him more elation than it did anything else. After Tang Wuling discovered his inability to control his own strength, he gave Mu Yi a call to ask about how he could resolve this issue. Mu Yi was the master of the body sect, so he definitely knew the most body refinement methods. Thus, Mu Yi gave him a suggestion. The problem that he was facing was that he was becoming too powerful too quickly, to the extent that his control was unable to keep up with his strength. All that was required was a period of adjustment and coordination, and everything would return to normal. During this adaptation process, the best way for him to speed things along was to further tap into his own latent potential, forcing all of his newfound powers to rise to the surface. The method for this was very simple. Just as metals had to be forged, the human body also had to be refined. The body sex cultivation method had always been a process of constantly refining one's body, transforming it into one's greatest weapon. Hence, Mu Yi told him that it was best for him to find someone suitable to beat him with all their might, stimulating his body's instinctive reactions through physical trauma, thereby allowing him to tap into more of his latent potential. At the same time, it would allow his body to better fuse with his bloodline power. Every time he was struck, his body would fuse with his own bloodline to a greater extent, and the instinctive reactions his muscles displayed in response to being struck would improve his control over his own body. As such, even if Jiang Wuyu hadn't come to find him today, he was preparing to call him up. Ma Shan's attacks were a little too ferocious for him to handle without adopting any defensive measures, whereas Jiang Wuyu's offensive prowess was just right. Tang Wuling was volunteering himself to be a human sandbag, but he was benefiting considerably from this experience. After being beaten for half an hour, he could clearly sense that his body's reactions had improved, and he had integrated himself himself to a far greater extent with his own newfound strength. During this process, he had clearly become more proficient at using his own blood essence power, and he also developed a clearer sense of the changes that had taken place within his muscles, bones, and meridians. As such, he was very happy to continue being beaten by Zhang Wuyu. Zhang Wuyu was also quite happy to be the enforcer, and he was venting a lot of his frustration throughout this process. However, at the same time, he was becoming more and more astonished. It was completely unfathomable to him that a human's body could become this powerful. He was like an indestructible cockroach. Even if his body had been constructed using the best uncommon metal, it would have still been smashed into pieces long ago, yet he was completely fine. It hurt to be beaten, but being the enforcer was also very tiring. After Zhang Wuyu beat Tang Wuling for 2 full hours, his clothes were drenched in sweat, and he'd exhausted almost all of his soul power. I'm done. That's it. I've got everything out of my system now. How much do I owe you? Zhang Wuyu panted. Tang Wuling was still raring to go, and he sighed. Wuyu, a man can never say that he's done. He can only say that he doesn't want to go on any longer. You need to be able to last as long as possible. Zhang Wuyu turned to him with a vicious glare. If it weren't for the fact that he was truly completely exhausted, he really wanted to smash his hammer into that punchable pretty face of his. Let's continue this tomorrow. Tang Wuling departed first, and he was feeling extremely limber and relaxed, as if he'd just received a good massage. Every inch of his body was in pain, but he could clearly sense that following this stimulative process, his blood essence power had forged a far stronger connection with his own body. Now, he just had to go back and meditate to adjust and sense the changes that had taken place within his own body. In doing so, he'd definitely be able to significantly improve his control. The next day, Tang Wuling had to participate in his first mecha battle of the finals. Under Ling Wuyu's instructions, Tang Wuling's mecha piloting skills were now a world apart compared to when he first arrived in the Legion. The most important aspects of mecha piloting are control and integration between mecha and martial soul. With Ling Wuyu's guidance, Tang Wuling was now at least able to control his mecha as if it were an extension of his own body. At the same time, he was able to better integrate his mecha with all of his abilities. The effect brought to him by his 6th soul skill, devouring heaven and earth, was also extremely potent, and through the use of this soul skill, he was able to triple his own powers for a short time. Otherwise, there was no way that he would have been able to defeat Blood9. These abilities could all be integrated into his mecha battles. After entering the generic mecha, Tang Wuling chose a spear as his weapon once again. Tang Wuling performed a few experimental movements with the mecha, and he couldn't help but heave a faint internal sigh. It was way too cumbersome. The generic mecha's massive size allowed it to carry more energy, and its increased weight also improved its destructive power, but that only applied to normal mecha pilots. To a soul master of Tang Wuling's caliber, the weight of the mecha was nothing more than that, dead weight. It was no wonder that most red mechas were under 6 meters tall. The larger a mecha was, the more cumbersome it became. Tang Wuling also set a target for himself. He was going to construct a black mecha that was also less than 6 meters tall. It only had to be just big enough to contain him after he donned his suit of battle armor. To him, a mecha's enhancement abilities and endurance were the most important aspects. Everything else paled in comparison. His strength had already reached an extremely fearsome level, so his mecha also had to be able to handle his power. Chapter 1027. After some careful consideration, Tang Wuling was already at a stage where he was beginning to fine-tune his mecha blueprint. Ling Wuyu had assisted him greatly during this process. As one of the best mecha pilots in the entire Legion, Ling Wuyu's status sat above that of even Zhang Wuyu. He and Ling Wuyu were both going to be participating in the first elimination rounds today, and according to the rules, participants from the same competition region wouldn't be pitted against one another during the first 3 elimination rounds. Tang Wuling moved his mecha around a little and swung his spear through the air before turning toward his opponent. Coincidentally, his number in the Soul Master battles was 33, and his number for the mecha battles was 66, so both of these numbers were very easy to remember. His opponent was also a melee combat mecha pilot, but their weapon was very strange. As opposed to an offensive weapon, it appeared to be a very thick and heavy shield. Shield-wielding melee combat mechas weren't very common, unless they were used to hold back enemies on the front line during a large-scale battle. However, this was a one-on-one mecha battle. Wasn't his opponent putting himself at a severe disadvantage by using a shield as a weapon? This meant that they were giving up on most of their offensive ability. However, Tang Wuling didn't underestimate his opponent just because they were using a shield. There were no slouches or weaklings in the finals, and the fact that his opponent was sticking with the shield meant that they had great confidence in it. Ling Wuyu had once taught Tang Wuling that during mecha battles, mechas that used orthodox weapons weren't worthy of fear or concern. Instead, it was the mechas that were using unorthodox weapons that he had to pay extra attention to, and in particular, there was the greatest variation in weaponry available to melee combat mechas. As such, rather than growing complacent at the sight of his opponent's shield, Tang Wuling became even more cautious instead. He still couldn't completely control his body yet, so in comparison he was actually more adept at controlling mechas at this point. After all, he only had to inject his soul power into the mecha and control it with his hands. Begin. Following the announcement from the electronic voice, Tang Wuling's first mecha battle of the finals officially commenced. His opponent immediately rushed toward him without any hesitation. Instead of wielding the shield in front of himself, he allowed it to hang beside him as he strode rapidly toward Tang Wuling's mecha. His mecha's footsteps were very stable and consistent. Tang Wuling also sprang into action. A mecha had to build up some momentum in order to unleash more power, so he also spurred his mecha into action, getting it to charge toward his opponent. The distance between the two of them was quickly being closed down, and when there was only around 50 meters left separating them, the opposing mecha, which had the number 161 hovering above its head, unleashed the first attack. It swung its right arm through the air, and the circular shield was hurled through the air, hurtling directly toward Tang Wuling while rotating rapidly. It clearly required a considerable level of skill to send the shield flying on a perfectly straight trajectory while rotating at such an incredible speed, and it confirmed Tang Wuling's suspicion that this shield was not meant for defensive purposes. For some reason, Tang Wuling had a feeling that this person's battle style was very likely going to be rather similar to that of Ling Wuyu. He was no longer the amateur mecha pilot that he once was, who only knew how to charge blindly ahead. The spear in his mecha's hand quickly sprang upward, and its tip struck the very center of the shield from down below with unerring accuracy. Ling Wuyu had once told him that the cause of all rotating weapons lay at the central axial point of their rotation. If he could throw off the balance of the weapon at that point, then the weapon's momentum and trajectory would both be greatly hampered, thereby making it impossible for his opponent to control it. Tang Wuling's spiritual power had improved significantly, and his control over timing had also been enhanced as a result. Right as the tip of his spear was about to clash with the shield, the latter suddenly shattered slightly before flying over Tang Wuling's mecha like a flat stone being skipped over water. At this point, both mechas were also very close to one another. After hurling his shield through the air, Tang Wuling's opponent no longer had a weapon, and he immediately took advantage of this by thrusting his spear directly toward his opponent's chest. In that instant, the speed of his spear increased dramatically, and it screeched through the air while releasing a burst of devastating spear intent. However, his opponent suddenly stopped on the spot, slamming his feet while the upper body of his mecha tilted slightly sideways. His mecha's two arms then completed an expert evasive maneuver before one hand reached out to slap the side of the spearhead, while the other made a grab for the shaft of the spear. At the same time, Tang Wuling was suddenly struck by a sense of peril approaching him from behind. What exemplary skills! Tang Wuling instantly deduced his opponent's battle tactics. While he was trying to grab onto Tang Wuling's spear with his mecha's bare hands, the shield that had just flown over Tang Wuling's head had swerved around like a boomerang to attack him from behind. If his spear were to be locked in his opponent's grasp, he'd either have to take the full brunt of the attack from behind or abandon his weapon to take evasive measures. Regardless of which of the aforementioned options he chose, his opponent would immediately seize the upper hand. However, Tang Wuling certainly wasn't going to give his opponent such an opportunity. After deducing his opponent's battle techniques, he instantly reacted. The spear that he had just thrust forward was withdrawn like lightning, and its unstoppable momentum instantly disappeared, leaving only a trail of spear intent and spear projection in its wake. Without even turning to look behind him, Tang Wuling thrust backward with the shaft of his spear, striking the shield behind him with unerring accuracy amid a resounding boom. Drawing upon the impact erupting from the shield, Tang Wuling activated his mecha's propeller and instantly accelerated drastically, crashing into the opposing mecha in virtually the blink of an eye. At this point, his opponent's mecha had just grabbed onto empty air. Boom! A loud boom rang out, and both mechas hurtled back in retreat at the same time. Another shield had appeared in number 161's hand. This was also a round shield, but compared to the shield equipped to the generic mecha, this one was entirely dark golden in color with faint turtle shell patterns running over its surface. The immense rebound force erupting from the shield clearly forced Tang Wuling back a little further than he was able to force back his opponent. As expected, his martial soul was also a shield. In the face of Tang Wen's unavoidable attack, number 161 was forced to release his own martial soul. As dark golden light flashed from the shield in number 161's hand, the shield that had just been sent flying by Tang Wuling's spear flew back into his other hand, creating a dual shield combo. As expected of the caliber of the participants in the finals, only the span of a few breaths had passed since the commencement of the match, but a series of clashes of tactics and courage had already ensued. Tang Wuling had gained a slight upper hand, but it wasn't enough to be decisive. Number 161's aura had clearly become denser and heavier. It was quite clear that he was already beginning to take his opponent seriously, and Tang Wuling's heart was also filled with anticipation and excitement. Only with an opponent of this caliber could he continue to improve his mecha battle techniques. Over time, his style of battle had progressed toward an untamed free-flowing style where he relied heavily on strength and brutality. However, that didn't mean that he didn't respect technique. On the contrary, he could only make the best use of his extreme strength in battle when he had exemplary control and technique to accompany that strength. In terms of techniques, that was something that he'd have to hone through mecha battles, and the more powerful his opponent was, the more battle intent would be evoked within him. He could sense that in terms of technique alone, this number 161 was slightly inferior to Ling Wuyu, but his powers were definitely not inferior compared to Ling Wuyu. He raised his spear and placed both hands on the shaft this time before controlling his mecha to rush toward his opponent again. A spear projection erupted from the front tip of the spear, and it was flickering between around a foot in length to over 10 feet long, making his opponent unable to gauge and predict it. Dark golden light also began to appear on his twin shields, and on this occasion, he didn't move. He positioned the generic mecha shield in front of himself, then raised his martial soul shield in a horizontal manner, clearly intending to use it as a weapon. The spear was thrust forward, and his spear intent and spear projection instantly combined as one. In that instant, it was as if Tang Wuling's mecha had completely fused as one with its spear, making it one massive spear that instantly pierced through the air, hurtling directly toward his opponent's chest. The spear projection was shimmering with scorching white light, and the unstoppable aura emanating from it drew reactions even from the spectators. Was this a kamikaze attack? Chapter 1028. The number 161 mecha squatted down slightly, pushing its generic shield forward first before immediately unleashing a set of super powerful defensive techniques. In the instant that the shield came into contact with the spear, the protective barrier on the surface of the shield was immediately pulverized by the spear projection. However, as his mecha squatted downward, it was able to angle its shield slightly upward, thereby altering the trajectory of the spear. Of course, these defensive measures alone wouldn't be enough to completely ward off Tang Wuling's devastating attack. However, right at this moment, a series of shield projections erupted from the round shield, stacking on top of one another in a dense pile beneath the spear. The pile then continued to grow taller and taller, hoisting his spear further and further upward. Everything had taken place in an instant, and when Tang Wuling's spear reached the opposing mecha, it merely skimmed past the mecha's shoulder, completely missing its intended target of the mecha's torso. In that instant, the squatting mecha abruptly sprang upward, and the layers of shield projections also rose upward. One layer of shield projection crashed into another, and the projections instantly expanded in size during the process, forcing Tang Wuling's spear upward. At the same time, the martial soul shield in the mecha's hand was instantly swept horizontally through the air, crashing directly toward the chest and abdomen region of Tang Wuling's mecha. The dark golden light around the edge of the shield was particularly sharp. Tang Wuling gripped onto his spear with both hands, and as he internally applauded his opponent's defensive techniques, he adopted a wider stance to lower his center of gravity while bringing his spear down from above toward the oncoming shield. The shaft of the spear crashed into the shield amid a resounding boom. It appeared that his opponent's generic shield had expanded to over twice its original size, but all that additional mass had only come from the dark golden shield projections, so a soul skill had undoubtedly been used. The shield was swept horizontally through the air, aiming for Tang Wuling's spear on this occasion. After all of the shield projections had stacked onto one another, the offensive power of this attack had risen to a whole new level. Tang Wuling harumphed coldly, and the spear in his hand suddenly turned into a platinum color as a burst of extremely powerful blood essence fluctuations abruptly erupted from his body. His spear remained completely unmoved and kept his opponent's shield at bay. Was his opponent trying to engage him in a contest of strength? Boom. The projections on the generic shield were shattered, and it was forcibly repelled backward, but Tang Wuling's spear remained completely unmoved. Countless spear projections immediately erupted in front of him, stacking on top of one another to create a forest of projections that hurtled directly toward his opponent. Number 161's mecha faltered momentarily, clearly taken aback by the enormous strength of Tang Wuling's mecha. At the same time, it forcibly withdrew its shields to try and defend itself against Tang Wuling's spear projections. However, on this occasion, Tang Wuling had injected his bloodline power into his mecha, and the entire mecha was glowing with platinum light. His opponent's shields possessed immense defensive power, but there was an absolute strength disparity between the two, so number 161's mecha was still being forced to stumble back in retreat. All of a sudden, number 161's mecha abruptly drew back, and a strange roar rang out as the turtle shell patterns on the surface of its dark golden shield abruptly erupted forth, forming a layer of light that encapsulated his mecha as a ball of light. As the ball of light clashed with Tang Wuling's spear projections, number 161's mecha was instantly sent flying backward, thereby opening up some distance between the two. This was excellent practical usage of his abilities. Just as Tang Wuling was about to continue to set off in pursuit, his vision suddenly blurred, and everything around him abruptly changed as he was struck by a rush of dizziness. Were these spatial fluctuations? Before he had a chance to react, a burst of powerful suction force suddenly erupted from up ahead, forcing his mecha to stumble forward. From the perspective of the audience, light had flashed from number 161's mecha, following which Tang Wuling and his mecha had swapped positions. After that, number 161's mecha waved its shield toward Tang Wuling, and a massive black hand suddenly appeared. The black hand made a grabbing motion toward Tang Wuling's mecha, and the latter was immediately forced to stumble toward the hand. Was this the legendary melee combat ability, spatial displacement? At the same time, number 161 swung his shields through the air, conjuring up countless shield projections, and at the same time, a massive total projection that was radiating a powerful aura emerged behind the mecha. Swan with shield. During the previous few clashes, Numa 161 had already realized that this number 66 was not an easy opponent to deal with. In particular, his strength exceeded that of anyone he'd ever seen. Both of them were melee combat mecha pilots, so strength was an extremely decisive factor in their battle. However, his opponent possessed such crushing strength that even his shields weren't able to keep him at bay, which meant that his chances would be very slim if he were to fight fire with fire. Furthermore, the battle techniques that Tang Wuling had just displayed weren't inferior to his in the slightest. Number 161 was an extremely experienced mecha pilot, and he immediately made a decision. He was going to unleash all of his power in an explosive combo to try and secure victory. As such, he used two of his signature soul skills in rapid succession, first displacing Tang Wuling to cut off his momentum, then unleashing his traction force to draw Tang Wuling's mecha toward him. This traction force stemmed from spatial laws, so one couldn't just resist it through pure brute strength. As such, Tang Wuling's mecha was drawn directly toward him, and at this point, he had already prepared his most powerful attack to end this battle once and for all. Following a brief stun stupor, Tang Wuling had already raised his spear horizontally before him. His opponent had unleashed those two soul skills far too quickly, to the extent that by the time he managed to react, the shield projection had already appeared right in front of him, which meant that there wasn't even enough space for him to wield his spear properly. Furthermore, his opponent was putting everything he had into this attack. Being able to remain calm during sudden turns of events was a very valuable ability in battle. Tang Wuling definitely possessed this ability. In the face of his opponent's devastating attack, his heart stirred slightly, following which his fifth golden soul ring suddenly lit up. This was the fifth bloodline soul skill that he'd used against Ma Shan once during battle, and he was now using it again. He didn't make this a blood soul fusion skill. It was just a pure bloodline soul skill. All of a sudden, number 161 felt as if he were experiencing double vision as he appraised number 66. Immediately thereafter, his shield crashed into Tang Wuling's spear and mecha, and he instantly sensed that something was wrong. The power of his attack was completely nullified by a string of slight tremors, and the tremors then abruptly intensified in an alarming manner, erupting forth as devastating vibrational shockwaves. Boom. Number 66's mecha was clearly the one that had been struck, but the one that was sent flying was number 161. Tang Wulin's mecha only seemed to blur slightly before it returned to normal, and it seemed that it hadn't done anything. The spear in the mecha's hand was also thrust forward, and its devastating spear projection erupted forth once again. The violent vibrational shockwaves made the number 161 mecha pilot experience a brief period of disorientation, during which he could feel bursts of terrifying power exploding relentlessly within his body. One had to realize that even the soul Douluo, Ma Shan, was sent flying by the soul skill of Tang Wulin's, and even though he controlled his power, directing his attack only toward one direction, thereby conserving some energy, it was still a very fearsome attack. The spear passed through between the two shields, and the spear projection instantly punctured through number 161's body. Immediately thereafter, the vibrational shockwaves appeared again, and a violent boom erupted within number 161's mecha. The spectators looked on in astonishment as number 161's mecha exploded into countless pieces. Meanwhile, number 66 drifted down onto the ground, looking like an insurmountable mountain. All of the spectators were completely flabbergasted. This match wasn't displayed in its entirety on the main broadcast, but people could choose to specifically view this live broadcast, and at the same time, there were many people who had access to star cabins logging onto the BattleNet to spectate this battle. It was undoubtedly the case that this was a battle that had filled everyone with awe and excitement, and clashes of intelligence and power had constantly been taking place from the beginning to the very end. Tang Wulin's final attack had further stunned all of the spectators present. Chapter 1029. Is this my fifth bloodline soul skill? Even though he hadn't unleashed it as a blood soul fusion skill, Tang Wulin could clearly sense that it was even more fearsome than a blood soul fusion skill. At the same time, he also began to develop an understanding of this ability. This was not just an individual skill, but something that could be integrated with any single one of his soul skills. It was absolutely perfect in all areas aside from the fact that it required a vast amount of energy expenditure to unleash. He decided to name it his Golden Dragon Vibrational Explosion, even though he had been trying to control the direction that the soul skill was unleashed toward with all his might. It had still sapped away over 60% of his soul power and bloodline power after just 2 uses. This meant that he could only use this skill in explosive bursts. At the very least, that was the case at his current cultivation rank. Even so, Tang Wulin's heart was still filled with excitement. This meant that he possessed an ultra-powerful explosive ability. Yu Yuna sat in front of a small lake and gently tucked a few strands of her silver hair behind her ear. She was looking at the women of the scorching basin washing their clothes on the opposite shore with a lost expression on her face. A hint of pain flashed through her eyes, followed by a hint of anticipation. He was coming to see her again. Why haven't you fused with me? A gentle voice that only she could hear rang out. I've already lost to you, so you can fuse with me at any time. Why haven't you done so? The voice sounded again. If Tang Wulin could hear this voice, then he'd definitely be extremely astonished as this voice belonged to none other than his little sister. That's right, this was Naya's voice. Gu Yue didn't reply. She merely continued to gaze into the distance in silence. We were already gradually combining as one, and that explosion split us apart again. But you've been healed by the singular velvet sky chrysanthemum, so why haven't you begun the fusion process again? Naya's voice was filled with befuddlement. Gu Yue still didn't say anything in reply. There seemed to be countless thoughts flashing through her purple eyes, yet there was also an implacably determined light shimmering within her pupils. What's going on with you? Naya was insisting on getting an answer, and her voice had become a little harsh. I should kill him. Only after killing him will I be able to dedicate myself wholeheartedly to the things that I should do. Gu Yue finally replied. You wouldn't do that. Naya's voice was filled with confidence as she countered. The fact that you won the bet against me indicates that there's no way you can do anything to harm him. So you wouldn't do that. Gu Yue was silent for a moment before suddenly replying. There's no way for you to stop me. You and I both know that only by killing him will I have the chance to awaken the genes of the dragon god in order to revive it. The divine realm no longer exists, and only under these circumstances will we be able to create our own divine realm which will be a haven for our brethren. This is not just about me, it's about the entire world of soul beasts, as well as all of the other beasts in this world. In order to achieve this, I have to destroy the human race so they can't prevent me from doing what I want to do. A forlorn tone entered Naya's voice. I'm naturally aware that this is what we should do. After all, your memories are my memories as well. But can we really do this? If we do this, how will we be different from humans? Were the human gods really the only ones at fault during that battle in the divine realm? Were we not at fault as well? Gu Yue sighed. You're still regarding yourself as a human, aren't you? Naya said in an indifferent voice. If you insist on that being the case, then I won't disagree. I am the human part of your memories anyway. You still haven't told me why you still haven't fused with me. You should be aware that if you don't fuse with me, I'll do everything in my power to stop you if you ever bring yourself to try and hurt him. Gu Yue's eyes glazed over slightly. You don't understand. Naya insisted. Then tell me so I understand. Gu Yue gently shook her head in response. No, I can't tell you. You'll know when the time comes. Naya asked. How long are you going to keep him in the dark for? Gu Yue looked into the distance with a blank expression. If it were possible, I'd want to keep him in the dark forever. Naya faltered slightly before a peal of tinkling laughter suddenly escaped from her mouth. I knew it. There's no way you can kill him. Gu Yue countered. But don't you know that aside from me, every single one of our brethren wants him dead? It's time for us to go back. You're going to leave? Naya asked in a trembling voice. But what about him? If you leave, he'll definitely guess that we've already recovered our memories. Gu Yue said in an indifferent voice. Even still, we have no choice but to leave. Ditian is close to tracking us down, and with his spiritual power, it wouldn't be difficult for him to discover Wulin. In our current form, we're still no match for Ditian. He already discovered my inability to kill Wulin last time, so he's definitely going to kill him in my stead. Only by killing him will we be able to fuse as one. No. If he dies, we'll be driven insane, and will completely fall apart. Naya's voice suddenly became very cold. A wry smile appeared on Gu Yue's face. Ever since I became the silver dragon after the dragon god was cut in half by the Asura sword, I've never felt this vulnerable before. You know, I really don't like this feeling. Gu Yuna, I've always wanted to ask you something. Naya suddenly said. What is it? Naya was silent for a moment before continuing. Are you happy when you're with him? Gu Yue also fell silent upon hearing this. She stood up, then squatted down beside the lake, cupping some water with her hands before letting it slip through her fingers. Without happiness, how would there be pain? In the next instant, it was as if time had suddenly stopped. Gu Yuna's body shuddered slightly, and she seemed to have sensed something. The forlorn and sorrowful expression on her face silently vanished, and was replaced by a knowing smile. In the next instant, she was encircled in a warm embrace. Gu Yue, what are you doing here? I've been looking all over for you. His gentle voice sent a surge of warmth flowing through her heart. No matter how painful the future was going to be, she was happy in this very moment. She really, really loved this warm embrace. Father. She called out in a faint voice. Tang Wulin held her in his arms, and said, I was released a little early, and I came over right away. Did you miss me? I did. She turned around and rested her head against his chest, basking in his warmth and listening to his strong beating heart as she closed her eyes. I really missed you. Tang Wulin gently stroked her long silver hair, and in this instant, his heart was filled with satisfaction. He was far happier than even when he'd manifested his soul core and broken his 10th golden dragon king seal. It was exactly because of her that no matter how rough the road ahead was, there were no obstacles in his eyes. At the very least, his heart still had a safe haven with the one that he loved. The two of them held one another, and the sunlight shone down upon them. The women washing clothes on the other side of the lake were completely entranced as they looked on at this match made in heaven. 2 days passed by very quickly, but those fleeting 2 days were filled with happiness. They cooked together, washed clothes together, walked together, laughed together, stargazed together, and looked up at the snowy Alps together. Every single second was filled with joy and intimacy. When are you coming back next time, father? Gu Yuna asked in a quiet voice. Tang Wulin replied, I might be away for a bit longer this time. I'm participating in a competition, and I'll only be able to visit you again at the conclusion of the competition. When that time comes, I should be able to stay with you for a few more days. Are you bored over here on your own? Gu Yuna smiled, and said, whenever I get bored, I think of you, and I'm not bored anymore. Tang Wuling praised her gorgeous smiling face, and he finally couldn't help but lean down and plant a gentle kiss on her cheek. Her cheek was fragrant and supple, and he had originally only intended to give her a single peck, but he couldn't help but kiss her again. Gu Yuna giggled. That tickles, father. Tang Wuling suddenly encircled his arms tightly around her. Never leave me again, all right? Gu Yuna's smile stiffened, and her expression gradually softened. She paused momentarily before nodding as she replied in a gentle voice, I'll never leave you. After Tang Wuling returned to the Blood God Legion, he was filled with motivation once again. He had already gradually become accustomed to his life here. The cultivation and battles were always intense and taxing, but all of the stress he accumulated would immediately vanish at the sight of Gu Yuna. He could even sense that he was able to detect elements more clearly than before, indicating that his spiritual power had improved once again. This was something that had most likely already been achieved in the aftermath of his last breakthrough, but it hadn't yet become clear to him. Following the 2 days he'd spent with Gu Yuna, everything had become clear to him. Chapter 1030. Only through working hard in his cultivation would he be able to become stronger and better protect her. As long as he could reach a certain level of power, he wouldn't have to worry about her leaving him even if she were to recover her memories. With that in mind, Tang Wuling was filled with motivation, and he immediately called up Jiang Wuyu to continue beating him. Why is it that after beating you up, I'm sore all over the place, but you're completely fine? What is your body made of? Jiang Wuyu complained. In the beginning, beating up Tang Wuling had been quite a satisfying experience, but after a while, he discovered that Tang Wuling wasn't affected by his beatings at all, yet he was always exhausted by the end. There's no way that Tang Wuling was human. Even iron and steel would have been reduced to powder by his attacks, yet they only managed to inflict a few slight injuries on him, and those injuries would be completely gone by the time they met again the next day. As such, the initial sense of satisfaction and achievement was constantly on the wane. Tang Wuling cracked his knuckles and suggested, how about we switch roles next time? Jiang Wuyu immediately shook his head vigorously. No way. By the way, why are you asking me to beat you up? With your personality, you definitely wouldn't do something for no good reason. Tang Wuling made no attempt to hide the truth. I'm doing this so I can better control my own strength. Now that you mention it, I don't really feel your beatings all that much anymore. It's time for me to change to someone else. I'll call up Big Brother Ma next time. He currently shared an extremely good relationship with Ma Shan. He had forged all of the metals required for Ma Shan's suit of 3-word battle armor, and they were not just soul-refined metals, but soul-refined alloys instead. After breaking his 10th seal and attaining his soul core, Tang Wuling's control in his forging had also improved significantly. As a result, the success rate for his spirit alloy fusion and soul refinement had both improved drastically. Ma Shan naturally couldn't be more pleased with this. Not only would a good suit of 3-word battle armor enhance his powers tremendously, it would also forge a great foundation that would increase his chances of being able to attain a suit of 4-word battle armor in the future. In the world of battle armor masters, there were quite a considerable number of 3-word battle armor masters, but 4-word battle armor masters were exceedingly rare. This was partially due to the extreme shortage of divine blacksmiths on the continent, but a major factor behind this also lay in the flaws of many suits of 3-word battle armor, which prevented them from being upgraded to a suit of 4-word battle armor. With Tang Wuling's forging skills, not only had many of the flaws in Ma Shan's suit of 2-word battle armor been ironed out during this upgrade process, the quality of his suit of 3-word battle armor was definitely one of the best among its kind in the entire Blood God Legion. Of course, with his straightforward personality, he made no effort to hide Tang Wuling's talents, and all of the 2-word battle armor masters in the Legion were now staring at Tang Wuling like starving wolves. He hadn't received that many soul refinement jobs in the past, but there were now almost constantly people piling in through the doors of his workshop. However, with his limited time, he was only able to accept a small proportion of these jobs. In the past, there may have been people who would have tried to pressure him into taking on their jobs, but he was now Blood 9. Who would dare to exert any pressure on him? In reality, the main beneficiary from all of this actually wasn't him. Instead, it was Long Yakshu, as half of all of the profits from Tang Wuling's workshop went to her. Tang Wuling was a very stingy person, but he also definitely kept his promises. As such, Long Yakshu profited to an even greater degree than Tang Wuling did from this workshop, as she didn't need to do any work. As a result of this vast influx of accolades, Long Yakshu had recently purchased a lot of expensive equipment and become significantly more powerful. She still wasn't as powerful as Jiang Wuyu, but it was looking very much like she would be able to surpass him in the near future. This made Long Yakshu's attitude toward Tang Wuling change even further. However, the only times that she could see Tang Wuling now was when he was forging in his workshop. In her eyes, Tang Wuling was like a tireless automaton. All he did every single day was cultivate and forge without taking any time to relax and enjoy himself. He was cultivating in the Blood God Battalion, which Long Yakshu was prohibited from entering, but she had known Tang Wuling for the longest period of time among everyone in the Legion, so she could clearly sense that Tang Wuling seemed to be changing noticeably every single day. From the time when he first arrived until now, he had completely evolved into a new man. Tang Wuling had managed to progress through the finals of the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition very smoothly thus far. His opponents were all quite powerful, but following his recent transformations, none of them posed much of a challenge to him. The elimination stage quickly concluded, and the round-robin stage commenced. After that would be the set of elimination rounds. There were a total of 8 groups in the round-robin stage with 4 people in each group, and only 2 people would progress from each group to the final 16. There was no risk of immediate elimination in the round-robin stage, but every match had to be treated as a must-win battle. Only then would one get a chance to progress to the next stage. What are you doing? UUA? Oh, if you like it, then eat some more of it. I'm great, don't worry about me. I'm entering the round-robin stage now, so I'll have to compete every single day, and I won't be able to visit you until after the round-robin stage. I'll see if I can pay you a visit in between the 2 stages. There's no need for that, father. Just come to visit me after the competition. Otherwise, it'll be too much of a hassle for you. All right. What a good girl you are. After ending the call, the smile on Gu Yuna's face was instantly replaced by a cold expression. She dialed another number, and after the call was connected, she said, begin the infiltration. Is everything already prepared? Yes, my lord. Everything has already been prepared. A deep voice replied from the other end of the line. Good. Make sure to constantly keep me updated, and don't let the Spirit Pagoda discover what we're doing. Don't worry, my lord, we've begun our infiltration from the elementary spirit ascension plane, so they won't be able to catch on to what we're doing. After ending the call, Gu Yue combed her hair before striding out of her room. If Tang Wuling could see her right now, he would definitely be given a huge shock as she was no longer at the scorching basin. Instead, she was in a world that was filled with metal. Are you ready? A pleasant voice sounded beside Gu Yuna's ears, and Heavenly Phoenix Douluo Leng Yaoshu was already waiting for her outside. Yes, teacher, Gu Yuna replied with a nod. A faint smile appeared on Leng Yaoshu's face. This disciple of hers had never disappointed her. She raised a hand and high-fived Gu Yuna. Show them just how powerful my disciple is. I will. An extremely determined look appeared on Gu Yuna's face. After passing this trial, she would officially become a backup spirit envoy, which would make her a truly high-ranking member of the Spirit Pagoda. The metal doors were opened, and Gu Yuna strode into the other room. What was awaiting her was the most rigorous trial that the Spirit Pagoda had to offer. Let the first round-robin match begin. Following the announcement from the electronic voice, Tang Wuling cast his gaze toward his opponent. His opponent had the number 47 hovering above their head. The one thing that set the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition apart from other competitions in the world of Soul Masters was that no one knew anything about their opponents, and there was no way to investigate anything about anyone. The mainframe kept all of the competitors' information extremely confidential, and one could only learn about their opponents by assessing their past competition footage. However, the main issue there was that no one even knew who was in their group, so they had no idea who their next opponent would be. As such, they'd have to learn about a vast number of opponents. Of course, this wasn't a problem to Tang Wuling as he had never even bothered to research any of his opponents. Instead, he preferred for his opponent to be as mysterious as possible, as the extra element of facing the unknown would provide him with greater stimulus. At this point, he had already mastered his own body to an elementary level, so he wouldn't lose control as he often did after first breaking his 10th seal. The more control he gained over his own strength, the more self-confident he became. There was still around half a month left until he had to face Blood 9's challenge, yet he had never been as confident as he was now. Only he could completely comprehend just how powerful he had become. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.